Hello, and welcome to Evolve. I am your host, Jamil Khoury, founder and director of Polycultural Institute, the think and create tank of Chicago's Silk Road Cultural Center. Evolve is a podcast designed to be a mix of spoken essays, written and delivered by yours truly, and conversations with interesting and exciting thinkers, changemakers, innovators, and disruptors. This episode of Evolve marks the launch of our newest collection titled The Rechurching of America. It's been a long time in the making. If you haven't already followed our first collection, Rebuilding Syria, we encourage you to do so. Lots of great content there, which I will continue to add to over time. But on to the new collection. Let's start with a few big questions. Is America rechurching? Is there a resurgence of religious belief and practice in the United States, or are our religious communities and institutions continuing to decline? There are indicators pointing in both directions. But if there is a resurgence, and that is what this series is rooting for, what do we want the resurgence to look like? And how do we ensure that a rechurching of America doesn't benefit fundamentalists, extremists, grifters, and those who appropriate faith to sanctify, prejudice, and inflict real harm on the people they tell you to hate? Yes, some churches deserve to close. The Rechurching of America promises to explore these questions and more. And although the term rechurching conjures a specifically Christian context, the context from which I speak, the idea and goal also extends to mosques, synagogues, temples, gurdwaras, jamatkhanas, prayer halls, etc. A flourishing religious mosaic is critical to America's soul, its security and success. My tagline for this collection is reviving religious life with the knowledge we've gained. There's no denying that over the past century, Americans have gained inordinate knowledge from science, technology, and cultural interchange. We've acquired wisdom and understanding from movements for economic and racial justice, women's and gay liberation, environmental stewardship, and collective struggles against war, imperialism, and colonialism, both at home and abroad. What we discern from that knowledge will vary widely, but it should ultimately lead to greater empathy and love. Remember, church is not about us. It is for us. That distinction matters. Church is about God. And if we are created in the image and likeness of God, if we are each born with a soul, then our need for God is inseparable from our being. Which is why America's passage toward building a more perfect union must also include a more perfect church. Perfection as an aspirational, ever-moving goalpost. But is that a political church? No. Not if political means shifting focus from why church exists in the first place. Is it a church that idolizes the state? Absolutely not. When the church serves the interests of the powerful, the church has failed. So is it a left-wing church or a right-wing church? Those terms should not apply. Church is a hospital for the soul. It is where we go to heal. It is where we intentionally seek communion with God and with one another. Church is for all. It is the greatest big tent known to humankind. You may be thinking, fine, but we can heal without ever going to church. No doubt. Many of us do. But in this collection, we're furthering the case for why church matters. I fully recognize that not everyone will be on board, and I entirely respect that. But with all our spiritual, social, cultural, economic, and political dysfunction here in the United States, a mantra has arisen that is grounded in truth. Go to church, go to church, go to church. Mosque, synagogue, temple, gurdwara, jamatkhanas, prayer hall. I want our religious communities and houses of worship to grow, prosper, and enjoy greater impact. De-churching has been an unmitigated disaster, but I endorse the desired growth with a caveat. If a church induces trauma and pain, if a church attacks people you love, leave that church. Run for your life. I cannot emphasize that point enough. God is about love and mercy, not fear and control. America will ultimately re-church. I am convinced of that. God willing, it already is. But let's please get it right. Church is about mending and belonging, not abuse and harm. It is where we grow in our spirituality and humanity, our relationship with God. Church isn't about name-calling, scapegoating, and despising entire groups of people. That is the antithesis of godliness. Now, is it easy to love your neighbor as yourself? No, it's not. No one ever said it was. But I can think of no greater or more worthy life challenge. God sets a very high bar for all of us. I know many people who describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. Their spirituality is nourished outside, beyond, or despite a religious tradition. It's a valid position. I also know many like myself who identify as both religious and spiritual. Spiritual because we're religious, religious because we're spiritual. There are numerous paths to walk. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge that there are all sorts of amazing people out there who do not believe in God, religion, or church, many of whom model what I would call a masterclass in ethics, morality, and integrity. I learn from my atheist, agnostic, and religiously skeptical friends and colleagues. They are among my greatest teachers. In fact, they make me a better, more open, and discerning person. Furthermore, I don't want people going to church who don't want to be at church. Compulsory religion harms the soul. Communities of believers are chosen communities and choosing communities. Not everyone will find meaning or purpose in a particular faith or tradition. And let us not forget the people who do attach to a particular religion or religious identity, but choose to forego a house of worship. That is entirely their prerogative and right. But in the interest of full transparency, I sincerely hope they reconsider. I want them to give church another chance. If at this point you're wondering about my own religious affiliations, let me tell you. I am an Eastern Orthodox Christian, Antiochian Orthodox. I was gifted with orthodoxy from my Syrian father. I primarily attend an Anglo-Catholic Episcopal church. I also attend Orthodox, Lutheran, and Catholic services, among others. In fact, if I were to do an inventory of all the Christian denominations I have experienced, the list would also extend to Methodist, Presbyterian, Oriental Orthodox, Eastern Catholic, Christian Science, Baptist, Evangelical, Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist, Unity, Unitarian, non-denominational, and hopefully someday a Quaker meeting. Not to mention all the sacred spaces outside of Christianity that I've been privileged to spend time in. Basically, I love churches. I love being at church. I need church. I donate to churches. I am most at bliss when I am inside a church. It is my favorite place to be. And I am blessed to live in Chicago, a city chock full of beautiful and robust houses of worship. I am in an interfaith marriage. My husband, Malik, is a Shia Ismaili Muslim. I am honored to have married into South Asian Ismailism. The interplay between Christianity and Islam has been a constant source of spiritual and intellectual enrichment in our marriage and our lives. Yes, God has plans for all of us. Or, as I ask the Holy Spirit every day, show us what you have in store for us. Lead us to where you need us to be. It is fair to say that rigidity, dogmatism, and denominational exclusivity were never on the table for me. My lifelong journey as a Christian is filled with questions, doubts, skepticism, and recalibration, not to mention all the anger, heartbreak, estrangement, and hurt that I've experienced. Fortunately, the grief and disappointment were always mitigated by hope, trust, faith, and belief, abundantly so. And if there's been one constant throughout, it is that I am a follower of Jesus, as deeply flawed and broken as I may be. So while I wrestle with the contradictions, inconsistencies, and hypocrisies of the church, of my fellow Christians, and of myself, there is no greater source of peace, solace, and comfort in my life than belief in a loving and merciful God. Yes, living as a believer is a constant commitment. We all fall short. But as Americans, we should be grateful that we still live in a country that allows us to participate freely in religious communities of our choosing. It is a freedom we must be vigilant about defending. Christian worship, as many of us know, is as varied and diverse as it gets. There is beauty and wisdom to be found in all traditions and denominations. Of that, I am convinced. But I am admittedly in the traditionalist camp. Call me a liberal traditionalist and Christian ecumenist. Personally, liberal traditionalist is a more apt descriptor than progressive Christian. That said, I align with a lot of progressive Christians. I love them dearly. I am eternally grateful for their witness and truth-telling. In my case, it's about historic continuity, sacred mystery, liturgy, ritual, sacraments, the centrality of the Holy Eucharist, the veneration of the Blessed Mother and the beloved saints, the teachings of the Church Fathers, and the art and aesthetic beauty that invigorates the senses and inspires awe. All of that feels critical to Christian worship. And yet, I also experience God's presence and spiritual uplift in the least traditional of worship spaces. Some studies suggest that American Christians are flocking toward worship that is ancient, historical, liturgical, communitarian, and stable, and are fleeing from worship that is contemporary, anti-historical, improvised, individualistic, and trendy. Those studies point to a need, perhaps an innate need, for a connection with God that is transcendent and immanent, not simply emotional and personally gratifying. Feel free to disagree. Your disagreements are welcome. But if there's incense and icons, if we're making the sign of the cross, if Christ is present in the Eucharist, we're off to a good start. Speaking of starts, this first installment is titled Taking It to the Pews. Think of it as an invitation and a rallying cry. I want you to take it literally. Showing up matters. So please, show up. Show up for God. A few hours a week will improve your life significantly. The movement to rechurch America, to reverse our nation's debilitating decline in church attendance, is a movement worth joining. If you want a healthy society, healthy communities, healthy cultures, healthy relationships, healthy individuals, spend time in the pews. Look, all churches want to grow. No one wants to shrink. That's a given. But for decades, we have watched multiple religious communities bleed hundreds of thousands, even millions of members, while doing little to stop or slow the bleeding. Granted, many are afraid, they're traumatized, shocked, obstructed by pride, seemingly incapable of addressing the root causes for the decline in the first place. They'd rather bunker down and put their heads in the sand. I get it. And I know that I'm speaking in gross generalities here. There are plenty of exceptions. But religious communities, like all communities, require introspection and humility. When I was born in 1965 in Chicago, the percentage of Americans who belonged to a house of worship was at or slightly above 70%. Today, in 2025, that percentage is estimated at anywhere from 37% to 45%. In other words, in the course of 60 years, not a long time, mind you, participation in religious communities has dropped by 1/3 to almost 1/2. Yet belief in God or a higher power remains impressively high in this country. It stands at roughly 83% of the adult population. In the post-industrial Western world, the U.S., to its great credit, is an outlier when it comes to belief in the divine. That is a fantastic foundation upon which to build. Despite the closure of tens of thousands of churches, particularly over the past 25 to 30 years, despite the lingering and devastating effects of the COVID pandemic, despite the fact that more churches close each year than open, we are nowhere near a religious collapse or some inevitable demographic doomsday scenario. There is plenty of cause for hope. But back to statistics. Much has been written about the rise of the so-called nuns. That's nuns, N-O-N-E-S, not nuns, N-U-N-S, otherwise known as female Christian monastics. Nuns are the people who write in or check the word nun when surveyed about religious affiliation. It is estimated that 28% of American adults today identify with this category. It is an extremely diverse group that includes atheists and agnostics, as well as those who claim no particular religious belief. It includes people who may also identify as ex-Christian or ex-Muslim or ex-fill-in-the-blank. Interestingly, like most of their fellow Americans, a majority of nuns profess belief in God or a higher power. Many, as mentioned earlier, describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. And many claim no hostility or animus towards organized religion, simply a lack of interest. Demographers and sociologists of American religion have been sounding the alarm about a steady uptick in the number of nuns for a few decades now. But something very interesting has been observed in the past 2 or 3 years. The percentage of Americans who check the nun box may have plateaued. That's right. It is no longer increasing. In fact, by some accounts, the actual percentage may be going down. Whereas it was once assumed that nuns would eventually comprise the majority of Americans, that projection is no longer gospel. Pardon the pun. For us religious folk, this is a very encouraging and exciting development. No doubt the dechurching of America, the dramatic exodus from the pews, has yielded negative, often catastrophic consequences, spiritually, socially, culturally, economically, and politically. The proof is all around us. When a worthy church closes, the community suffers, and people suffer. But decline has also produced a groundswell of opportunity, much of which we will explore over the course of this series. Renewal is real. So if you don't already have a house of worship to call home, do yourself a favor and find one, or 2 or 3. Make a commitment to being there. On that note, thank you for joining us for this episode of Evolve. To learn more about Silk Road Cultural Center and Polycultural Institute, and to support us with a donation, please visit us at silkroadculturalcenter.org. If you enjoyed this content and want to help us expand our reach, please like, share, and subscribe. We all have a role to play in the rechurching of America. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. May God bless and protect you.